All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so excited for us to be doing our Choice Spotlight interview this month. My name is Kate Stedman. I'm the Director of Agent Development here at Choice, and I'm so excited for us to be having a conversation with our agent, Heather Donovan, today. At Choice, we believe in connecting you guys with the people, systems, and resources that pack a punch in your business, and recognizing that so often the most valuable resources are the ones right in front of us, and the best way we can learn is from one another, which is what our culture is all about. So that is what we will do today. Heather is an incredible agent. She is the go-to agent in her community of Sunset Oaks. She was featured in the Triangle Real Producers magazine in 2022 and continues to take her business to new heights. She's been with the Choice community since 2018, so she's one of our OG members. She was the top agent in volume sold in 2021, selling a whopping 19 million. And just this past May, she set a new record here at Choice for highest volume sold in a given month, closing an impressive 5.18 million in a single month. So she is absolutely one to watch. She is one who has a lot to share, and I'm so excited to be having this conversation today. Heather, thank you so much for joining us and welcome.
Absolutely happy to do this.
Yeah. Well, you guys know how I like to get started. I know I say this every time, but obviously we all started somewhere, right? So I like to start these conversations with a little background. We never know where our paths connect and kind of what our histories share. So as we get started, Heather, I'd love for you to just give us a quick insight on where you're from and what you did before you got into real estate, and then what was your catalyst in getting into the business.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm originally from Syracuse, New York. My family moved around a lot. So if anybody is familiar with the central New York area, I graduated from a high school called Vernon Verona Sherrill, which is like 45 minutes outside of Syracuse. And now my family has since moved back there. So um, before I went into real estate, I've done various sales jobs my whole entire life. I straight out of college, I worked for the YMCA for 10, 11 years. Um, and then an opportunity presented itself to go into advertising sales. And it was my best friend's dad who was telling me about the job. And he was like, whether you want to admit it or not, everything you've been doing at the YMCA is sales. Cause I'm like, I don't have experience. I don't want to be a telemarketer. That's not my gig. Um, Needless to say, I have did that for over 20 years. So I dove right in and realized that I was pretty good at that. So stuck with that for a while. And the main reason why I left that business is we started changing ownership a lot. And usually when that starts to happen, it may not be good longevity for that position. They are still in business and I do still help them from time to time on projects. Um, but when I was my last year in Syracuse before that job moved me to New York City, I had really been interested in real estate. And I had talked to a realtor who was like one of the top producers in that community. And she kind of talked me out of it, or maybe scared me out of it, because she just kept talking about how much money you had to have saved up, like in order to have that good cushion when you went into the business. And um, at the end of the day, I'm thankful she did that because I don't think that was the right time for me to have started in real estate. I feel like life led me down a lot of pathways that got me here to North Carolina. And I feel like I'm extremely thankful this is where I decided to do it. When I got here, there was like another ownership change, and it was very ironic at that time because I had signed up to take my license exam or take the license course and then the exams the month before that happened. So life always puts you where you're supposed to be at the right time.
You know, that's right up my alley. I so strongly
Yeah.
believe that. And it's
Sauce with
always so
eggs?
beautiful to look
Did what?
back and
Sauce with eggs?
it's always so beautiful to look back and see all of those little moments where you had those touching points and you likely wouldn't have known it then, but that's where you end up. And so it's kind of a nurture and process. So so beautiful. Thanks for sharing that. And I know obviously it kind of scared you away for a brief moment, but I am happy to hear that she gave you that insight, even if it was intimidating and likely provided. I think she fluffed it a little bit in terms of how much she had said that you would need, but I do think so often people get into the business and think that they're going to have their first sale immediately. And it is nice to know that you've got a little cushion. And I think that the way you present yourself when you don't necessarily need it right then can matter. But all good things that led you to where you are. So you decided to take the jump. You've been in some real estate. So obviously that's quite a nice little intro into every aspect of real estate and using that going forward. Where did you start your career in real estate, both in terms of like firm structure and setup, and how did you treat it like a business when you were first getting into it?
Let's see. I started out as an independent agent at KW Carey. I had interviewed with a lot of different brokerages at that time, just trying to figure out where did it feel right? What was the compensation situation like? And KW at the time felt like the right place to be because they were known so much for training. And I'm like, I knew I didn't need to learn how to sell, but I needed to translate those skills into how to sell real estate. So that's how I met Brian, actually, and several other people on this call.
And a nice little touch point. I don't know if you said this before, but just curious. So you were in New York and then you are at KW Cary. When did you make the move down to North Carolina and how did you decide on Cary?
Yeah, well, it's funny. I owe my cheerleader friend from high school for bringing me to Sunset Oaks. Ironically, I tell her all the time, like, you changed my life and you probably didn't even realize it. But I had been transferred to New York City for about a year and a half, and then I had a lot of clients for the federal government. So New York City, just like, it was fun. I did a lot of cool things that year and a half, and then it got old really fast. And Central New York people are super nice and friendly, and New York City was not like that. So um, I moved down to Fredericksburg for a while, and then things changed. The structure of the job changed again, and they allowed us to move wherever we wanted to move. And I had posted on Facebook, like, considering moving to Raleigh or Charlotte, like, what do you guys, anyone that lives there, give me your advice. And my friend Heather, who I cheered with all through high school, said, you need to move to Raleigh. Here are the top 10 reasons why you need to consider it. I came down, met her. She had found me a house to rent with a fenced in yard, a dog sitter. Like, she had every objection I could have possibly had covered. So I've been here now for just about 10 years.
Wow. Well, and it's funny, part of the reason I ask that, right, is like some of us are born and raised locals, but so many of us are transplants, and so many of our clients are also relocation people. And so the reasons that you move and the objections that you have are the things that our clients face every day. So it can be a good reminder to kind of circle back to and say, like, oh yeah, these are the things that they encounter, maybe some of the objections they had. So you get into real estate, and one of the things I always like to ask as we talk about people's transition in is, so often coming from some corporate position, you have people telling you what to do and you have a more formal structure, and it can be a little intimidating to now all of a sudden have the days completely your own and to make that structure for yourself. So I'm curious what that looked like. Did you have any fears going into the business? How did you organize your days? And what was your lead generation when you first got started?
Yeah, my fears were definitely going from having a consistent salary and bonus to not having any idea when I was going to get paid initially, which is why I stayed on as a contractor with that job for a while, just so I at least knew there was something coming in during that time. Um, when I first got my license, and I know we'll talk about this a little bit later when we get into farming, but I felt like my neighborhood was a great place to start. It's the one place where I really knew a lot of people at the time. So I started to immerse myself into, I got on the social committee. I started ladies' wine nights during that time, just so I could get to know people, because I was sort of in my little shell when I first moved here. But I knew if I was going to be successful at this, I had to get myself out there. So what's that saying? Like, I'm an introvert that likes to pretend she's an extrovert sometimes. But um, so lead generation for me started in my direct neighborhood. And of course, I let all my local friends know that I was in the business too. Um, Day-to-day schedule is like, I've always been very successful with time blocking. So I would sit down and decide, okay, this is what I'm gonna plan for the day, whether it be calling my SOI, focusing on setting up systems and what was going to work for me and tweaking that along the lines. And then the rest of it was really just, okay, farming is going to be very important to me to get this going. What does that look like? What do I need to do? And I spent a lot of time on that in the very beginning.
And we'll talk about that so much more
Yeah.
in a few minutes, but to that point, obviously you're a very organized person and intentionality matters, right? Like when we talk about farming, we talk about things that you're going to be spending time and money on. It matters to make a plan for it and so that you can do it for the long run because it's really those repeated touches and nurtures that pack a punch. But I love what you said about having wine nights, right? Like you guys, if you know me, I'm a huge advocate for doing things that light you up and are authentic to you and feel sustainable and especially kind of fit your lifestyle. And if you're an introverted extrovert and you already know that like your community or your people, sure, like come over to my house. That's kind of a low threshold of what I need to do to prepare. I'm going to be here whether you guys are here or not, right? Like I want you to feel like your family and you'll kind of invite me into yours as well. So that's a nice little stepping stone into doing things more formally. So I'm curious when you felt like you started to really hit your stride or when things clicked, when did you get your first deal and how did you kind of build your momentum?
I will say I like to just stay on the positive track, but I did make a change to I had started my business, but it was so slow to me. And I was like, I felt like I was just spinning my wheels over and over again, but not getting anywhere. So I had met with Brian at the time, who was team leader, might have been the title, I think, during that time. And I was just like, I need some help here because I needed to be doing things that are going to help me to get my business, not just sitting at home doing like this force training homework that we were doing at the time, because it wasn't getting me, it wasn't helping me close deals. It was just like doing these activities for sales that I already knew how to do. I was missing the piece of how does it translate into real estate. So then I immersed myself in to the different trainings that KW had offered. And that's where I was sitting in a session with Doris at the time. And that's how I learned about the neighborhood newsletters and how beneficial that had been for Doris at the time. Um, and then I just started taking tidbits from a lot of the top producers that were there at the time doing a lot of open houses, and um, they allowed me out of the training program that had been instituted when I first started. And then not long after that, Brian started Choice, and I was like, sign me up, I'm coming over. So, um, yeah, and from that, so honestly, from the point I joined Choice, I would say is when it really took off. Because number one, I had more money to invest back into my business, which was huge at that time because I wasn't really producing a lot. Um, and I was really struggling on like how can I do these basic small things that I want to do that I know I have to do to build community, but also not put myself into debt doing it. So the structure of Choice made a lot of sense to me at the time. And then I just started pouring into it in a smart way. And then from then on, like I was consistently producing over 7 million a year, from the point I joined Choice on.
Well, I love that plug. We didn't ask for it, but I am happy to hear it, obviously. But it's also one of the things that I kind of picked up as you were talking is you were listening to what other successful agents were doing and neighborhood newsletters. Obviously I always say like give everything a try, but don't do it just for the sake of doing it. And it sounds like there were a few things that you've been doing just because you've been trying based on the system that was provided. But then there are things that just kind of work forever if you really invest in them. And so props to you guys for showing up today because that's exactly what we're doing also is hearing what works from other people. So you started to get your momentum. Love that it was here and that choices structure helped you do that. I want us to go ahead and start diving into lead generation. I know we've kind of hinted at it, but obviously all of us would love to be at a point in our business where we are strictly based on referrals and that is what fuels all of it. But it is always a nurture process no matter how long we've been in the business. And so I'd love for us to just kind of talk about that. You moved here, you didn't know people, you started nurturing that intentional community, especially within your neighborhood. And so I know you started talking about that, but will you go ahead and start diving into your farming process? What is farming to you? I know we throw that term around a good bit and it's understandable, right? Like it is a physical location in which you focus your business. Sometimes it is your neighborhood, sometimes it's not. But beyond that, like tangible action can be a little intimidating on what that looks like and budget wise. So one was did you move into Sunset Oaks from the beginning, and was it your intention to focus your business there, or did you end up focusing your business there and then end up moving? And then what points of connection did you continue to make as you started farming?
Yes, definitely. First up, I will say I have never ever paid for a lead. It just wasn't my vibe. And I think you have to do what is going to make you feel comfortable and even more so make you feel safe. For me personally, I wanted to have a business where it was either like in a community or a link to someone within my community. Because I probably watched too much true crime and Dateline, and I was like, I don't want to be meeting random people. It works for some, it just wasn't going to work for me. So when I was getting close to taking the licensing exams, I'm like, okay, I got my license in October. What can I do? And I decided, oh, let's go all in and go big. So I did 630 8 to 10 pound pumpkins to every single house in Sunset Oaks. I had a little door tag over the top of it that said "Happy Fall, y'all" from your local or from your neighborhood realtor and friend, my information on it. Everything I ever do is all soft touch because I don't want to be like that used car salesman in your face. I like it to come more organically when I do things. I never anticipated the impact those pumpkins would make when I first did them or how much they continue to impact my business. That day, like the first day, because it usually takes 3 to 4 days to get that accomplished every year. And then I'm like in traction for my back for like a week later because it's hard work to get that all done. But I had one person start a comment thread on the neighborhood Facebook page, and I ended up with close to 200 comments on there about how nobody has ever done something like to give back to the neighborhood and how cool it was. And I got my nickname of the Pumpkin Fairy from that. So I was like, oh man, this really took off. Like, this sounds like something I'm going to end up doing every year now. But um, it just made a splash, but it wasn't like I was, and again, I'm not door knocking, but I think it was just a different feel that I gave people because I was giving them something. I was trying to brighten their day rather than just knocking on the door. What are you going to give me? So I saw how effective that was in the beginning, and that's always been a keystone in how I've run my business from that day forward. And I do still do the pumpkins every single year. There was one year I couldn't, and it was that year we had a bunch of hurricanes and the pumpkin crop wasn't that great. And but I still did something. I had to regroup and I made all right, there was a woman in the neighborhood who made wood ornaments. So she made the state of North Carolina, and then she put a heart over Holly Springs. And that took off like crazy too, because I had people write on the back, like, oh, we wrote on the back, so we'd always remember you gave it to us. And it's just it's little, but it means a lot.
Yeah.
So farming to me is focusing on, for me, it's a specific neighborhood. I am trying right now to start a second farm. I don't know yet how that's going to go because I'm only like at step one. So stay tuned. I can let you know how that's going in maybe 6 months. But farming could also be if you're on like the PTA or if your kids are on a football team or anything where there's like a baseline community. So you don't have to take on 630 homes, but find something that either you are passionate about, you have energy towards, and you have contacts you can reach out to. So to me, that's farming. You have to like and be passionate about it in order to stay consistent with it.
Especially with that quantity. And I love what you said. The thing that kept coming to mind as you were talking about, both the pumpkins and the little ornaments is Libby's class of surprise and delight, right? Like, obviously, the pumpkins you have now become known for, which is great. And it's a nice little surprise each year, but it also can be nice to just throw in things that are a little bit different. Absolutely, you can do things annually if you would like to, and if that continues to light you up, or you can kind of switch it up or try different things each year. Um, I know in our farming panel, which we talked about before, I think a good few people joined, but a few years ago, we did a farming panel that Heather was on, and we shared a lot of the tangible details. Would you mind sharing some of those in terms of how you coordinate with the farmers and getting things dropped off, how you tangibly get them delivered to people? Are they coming to you and picking them up? Are they going door to door? Who are you hiring for that? And then I think at one point you had mentioned, I think your neighborhood is like no soliciting. And so how did you, I don't want to say work around that, but how did you make sure that you covered your bases and protecting your investment?
Definitely. So the first year, again, because I wasn't completely rocking it in sales, I had to figure out a way to do it, but at a really reasonable rate. So I went down and negotiated with a farmer at the farmer's market. And I explained, I'm trying to launch my business. Like, I plan to do this every year. If it takes off, I'm more than happy to pay more on year two, but would you help someone out who's really trying to start the business? And he ended up doing it for me, which I really appreciated. Um, so that helped significantly. Um, and it was really then just how does it look? And I didn't want to do like have everybody just show up in my driveway because am I really touching everybody that way? So again, it is a lot of work, and this has since evolved into me hiring kids and paying them really, really well to help me with this. I had some blooper moments with ring doorbells where I would trip up people's stairs, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna look like the klutz city over here. Um, I have had some unique challenges in my neighborhood. I, I have a few other realtors that live in my neighborhood, and I don't think they particularly loved that when I did this and got such a big result from it, they kind of started making things a little bit difficult here and there, which is where this whole no soliciting thing came into play. I did not even think about that, truthfully, my first year. But when all this noise got started, I called the town, talked to the HOA. The HOA says we have no problem with it as long as the town's okay with it. And when I called the town of Holly Springs, they were like, you're giving people something that is not soliciting. You are literally bringing them a surprise or a gift. So don't worry. But every single year since then, I get it in writing from the town. That way I have it on hand. So when the silliness starts, I'm prepared for it. From there, it was, okay, how am I going to tackle this? Because when you get 12 to 13 massive cartons of pumpkins just put into your driveway, it, I was like, oh my God, what did I get myself into with this? So, it's definitely evolved in how I've done it. And every year I pick up a different, like the door hangers don't fit over all the stems because some are short, some are thick. And how do I do this? So now you hole punch and put a rubber band on it and put it around the stem. But you have to just constantly evolve anything that you're doing. And at the end of every season, I'm like, okay, this worked, this didn't work. I feel like I need to change X, Y, Z, and then kind of take it from there. So that's, I would say, how the pumpkin side of it goes. And then I have other things that I don't know if you want me to jump into that now with the neighborhood or
Yeah.
not.
Yeah, I would love for you to. And a few things I wanted to touch on real quick. I know you had mentioned this a few moments ago, but one of the things that I was thinking as you were talking about always giving something is, I think especially with pop buys, like some of the cute, like punny phrases that can be involved, they are fun and quirky. But if we finish it off with either on a note card like that or in a conversation with someone of like, let me know who you know, like, it just undermines everything that you just did and said, right? It feels a little grabby. That's the term that I like to use is like, if I'm going into some marketing, I like to think, is this feeling grabby? Does it feel like I'm taking something or does it feel like I'm giving something? And so I like that you had kind of mentioned that. And it's always an evolution, right? Like I believe that stagnant water isn't healthy water. And so even if it's something that we're doing repeatedly, how can we look for the change? How can we make it better for ourselves and for the client experience and easier? Like things don't have to be hard. I think as entrepreneurs, which we all are, and business owners, like it's important for us to remember that it can be easy and we should be setting ourselves up for that. So I love that you always evaluate that at the end. Yes, I would love for you at some point, I would love for us to talk about costs. But I think it might be realistic to talk about that kind of towards the end of farming. So I'd love for you to just go ahead and jump into some of the other things that you've done within your neighborhood. I'd love to hear what those are and how often you are doing these things.
Yeah, I think so. Number one in farming is whatever you're doing, do it consistently. That way you are having a consistent touch point every single step of the way. So I did borrow Doris's idea of doing the monthly newsletter. Um, I did not just copy Doris's. I'd like to use the term, I Heatherized it. So everyone knows I love pink. So we had to make it fun and pink and colorful and just fit the vibe of who I am, because you want people to try to get to know you through everything that you do. So I did pay to have somebody kind of I kind of brain dumped what I thought should be on there. And then she created it from there. I, for a long time, worked with Pip and Carrie. They would just do my updates and then mail it out. We'll talk about this later too, but I now have somebody that helps me with marketing, and she will update it, and I still have Pip send it out. One thing that it was interesting that I had made this choice and I didn't know if anyone would notice it. I did not want to just do like to current resident or anything like that, because I'm more apt to look at something that actually has my name on it. So I created the mailing list with all the names, corresponding addresses, and all of that. I update that every single month. So I look and see who moved the prior months, and then I update the database accordingly. And I had a few people comment to me, like, it was really nice to get, like, it's obviously a marketing piece, but to have it personalized to us. So that was something I wasn't necessarily anticipating, but it was noticed. And out of that as well, on the very back of mine, I have what's called neighborhood resources, because there's like a joke in the neighborhood. Heather has a guy for that. And it really should be guy or girl for that. But anytime anyone needs anything in this neighborhood, they will message me and be like, who do you have for bat removal? Or who do you have for appliance repair? And I always have that right next to my computer. I'm like, here you go, here you go. And I've really built a reputation of go to Heather. She's got good people that are tried, trusted, and true. So that's been another consistently important part of it. With the neighborhood as well, being on the social committee, again, because I've had a few challenges along the way with the neighborhood politics. When I do social committee, I don't have anything on that says real estate. I make sure it's just Heather Donovan, resident of Sunset Oaks. And I feel like everyone already knows my face, so I don't need to be running around at those events with a t-shirt on or anything like that, and has helped me to keep the peace and in that regard. But every single event I'm there, they know I'm volunteering my time, and I probably have 10 to 20 conversations on how's the real estate market, what's happening, how's it going in the neighborhood, are we all, maintaining our equity. And so just by putting yourself out there, again, soft way, and they're fun, you do the kids holiday party or whatever it may be. And it's just another way to keep your face and name out there to the people in your neighborhood. So I would say that's the gist of my general consistency with the neighborhood, but there's not a month that goes by that newsletter doesn't go out.
And having the right people makes all the difference, even if you can Google it, right? Like, are they reliable? Are they going to show up? And I'm sure that they can feed into your business as well. Those vendors can. So always a great resource. I'd like to pivot slightly, but not too much, into your SOI events. Obviously, these can be things that tap into your neighborhood, but they can also be past clients or friends. I know there are certain events that you do annually and things that you're pretty consistent about. And then there's other events that you've kind of pivoted and evolved over the years. And I think I would love for you to spend time talking about the things that you enjoy in life, and some of the events that you've done kind of centering around that, because again, that matters. And the way that you show up when there are things that excite you, it's a different energy than if you're just doing something because you think other people will like it. So will you talk a little bit about those events that you do?
Yes, absolutely. So I've pretty much consistently done photos in the spring, and then I do holiday photos typically every November for my clients. And again, like it's just listening to people. The first year I did the spring photos, I looked over and one of my clients was like, had tears in her eyes. And I'm like, what's wrong? And she goes, we honestly have never had a family picture taken. And her kids were like 12 and 14 at the time. She says, like, we're loaded with cell phone pictures, but we have never actually done this. And then through talking to her, she also shared with me that when her and her husband got married, the photographer lost the photos. So they didn't even have any wedding photos. So I went over and talked to the photographer. I'm like, you need to do like a whole set on just them for me too. And she just was so blown away at that. And that was sort of the recurring theme throughout the day is, oh, we've never thought to do this. My branding isn't on any of this stuff, but when they look at those photos or they're hanging in their house, they're going to remember who helped them to get those photos taken. Holiday is the same thing. I like to joke with them and say, I'm going to make sure you have the photo for your holiday card every year. So they sign up. We have Santa there. We have special cookies made, and that I will put branding on. They're just 10-minute mini sessions, but the impact and the memories that you can create, like one example, I think it was two holidays ago. One of my clients who I had met at an open house bought a home. She signed up for pictures, brought her mom, who was definitely up there in age, and that was the last photo that the family has with her mom, because her mom sadly passed away a few months after that. And she called me after. She's like, you have no idea. Like, we never would have had that if you didn't have these events, because it's not something we would have just signed up for ourselves. So it's that heart connection and the heart. You'll hear me say that as I talk about some of this other stuff, but I think being genuine, authentic, and making that heart connection with your clients is super important. And then with other events and kind of how that process has evolved over the years, as I started to see anything I did, I was seeing a lot of the same faces. So I'm like, okay, maybe I need to switch this up or see what could be of interest to other people. So I did an event at what was called, is it Brush and Board or Board and I think it was Brush and Board. They have sadly closed, which I was so sad to hear because my clients loved that event, but a bunch of new faces showed up for that. It was more artsy. It was, they could each make their own wooden framed piece or box or, whatever they wanted to make. And I was like, okay, I might be onto something here, because now I have a whole new group that's showing up for something. And it was 2 hours. We did charcuterie, wine, beer, and water. My lender sponsored that with me, so the cost wasn't that much to do. That was a good example. And then the year after COVID, I'm like, I'm gonna try a party and I'm gonna see how this goes. But I essentially did not realize when I was taking that as I'm like, I'm essentially planning like a wedding reception, because I had never done anything to that scale before. So it's a massive learning curve. Sorry if you hear, no. Winnie's deciding she wants to talk. With that event though, I really thought through, like, there were some people I knew didn't know anybody that was coming to the party. And like, no one wants to walk in a party where they don't know anybody. So I went line by line on everyone that was on my client list or people that had referred business to me. That was sort of like the initial invitation group. And then I'm like, okay, I know this person is new to the area, or I don't know how many people in the neighborhood this individual knows. And I would then invite people I knew that they knew that may not have been on the list before. Or people I thought would have like a similar interests. That party was extremely expensive, but that party has paid for itself now 2 times over. And it was from that level of inviting additional people that weren't on my list. I ended up with 6 transactions out of it, and only one was actually from my SOI. The rest of it was from all these other individuals that got invited. So that was a really interesting takeaway that I had from that, and that I will definitely continue to do forward. But that's like, again, I'm passionate and have a relationship with several of the pros on Dancing with the Stars. So I'm like, I don't do anything halfway. So I'm gonna have Gleb come to this event. Um, and he was like, sign me up, I'll come and do it. And he did like a meet and greet with everybody. And um, he and I did a dance there just to show, hey, I've taken dance lessons before again. Fun fact, this is something different about me. That part of the event could have gone a little bit better, but that's more of a Gleb and I having different thought processes on being prepared for things. But you just roll with it. But I will tell you too, with that party, they still talk about that party. They still will say, when are you doing another one of those? That was so fun. So now I'm trying to figure this out. Like I want to do something at like the 10-year anniversary of me being in real estate, but that feels like that's too far away. So I'm currently trying to think this through for next year. And then I do a bunch of other like little things. I'll do giveaways. I will like free house cleaning or summer grill kits, things like that, just to keep engagement that also don't cost a lot of money. Again, this process has evolved in the last, starting 2 years ago. I sit down every year with a good realtor friend of mine, not currently a choice, but hopefully one day she will come here. And her and I are like a yin and a yang, but it's perfect for planning this because we help each other to create our touch calendar for the year. So it's like we try to do a giveaway, a touch point, and then some kind of event. That way every quarter you're doing those three things. And then it's helped us bounce ideas off each other, or she'll ask me like, how did that work for you? And her and I have very different businesses. So it's interesting to hear like what will work for me that doesn't work for her, and vice versa. But I think having an accountability partner and a planning partner is something I would highly recommend doing. It's definitely helped me to stay organized and on top of things instead of just willy-nilly putting random events together just for the sake of doing them.
It's been such an evolution to watch, and that party was such a hit. I had honestly kind of forgotten about it until you said that. But then as soon as you did, I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, I remember how much planning that took, and but how big of a hit it was. And I know you mentioned it, but like you you also you didn't say this part, but you're a photographer, right? And so Heather knows a lot of people from Dancing with the Stars. Have you also done like a dance lesson event? I feel like I might have seen that
Oh yeah.
on your
Yeah.
Instagram.
Yeah, I did do a dance event last April. Gleb came to town and invited my clients to a dance studio in Raleigh, and we did like a 5-6 hour day. So it was like he taught a dance lesson and then did a meet and greet, taught another lesson, did a Q&A. He did like cupcakes. He had special cupcakes he wanted, and so we did a whole thing. With the group on that, but it was like way less formal. So everybody, and he did such an amazing job of getting around that room and making every single person feel special that day. And it was another thing where I got emails the next day saying, that was so much fun. Thank you so much. Who would ever thought, I'd ever be able to do something like that? And hardly anybody in that room knew how to dance. So it was just a fun, let's learn some basics in social salsa dancing. But
Well, and I think so often when we're as agents, if we're planning an event, we're like putting so much time and energy into something. And sometimes we forget, like, is this something that people, they have busy lives, right? Like, is this something that people are going to spend half a day on a Saturday making time for? Because even if it's a 2 hour event, right, like that's time that they're driving or time that they're not with their kids, or maybe they are bringing the family, like, is this something that will stop them enough to not only have them be there, but excite them and talk about it? Or does it feel like one more thing to do in a busy schedule? And I know you mentioned this a number of times, both with the newsletter and with that event, but just the power of knowing people's names is so important. And as someone who's attending something, just the feeling of someone knowing your name, it just makes such a big difference, and it's felt. So props to you guys. I think having this conversation is the perfect segue. Obviously, that is a lot to do and a lot to organize, but the follow-up and the nurtures in advance and then everything afterwards, that's quite a lot to keep track of. I would love for you to talk about how you nurture your database. Obviously, people say it all the time, but these events, yes, it is great when people attend. That is a huge goal of it. And a lot of the purpose of these events is to have touch points to communicate about. That's not just like, here's the valuation of your home. And so I'd love for you to talk about that. I'd love for you to talk about, how you organize all of this, and how you budget it. I know you kind of mentioned it on the front end, but planning these things at the beginning of the year, how are you intentional about doing all of that?
Yeah, I can start on the budgeting side. Like I've been very fortunate that the lender that I had bought homes with before I went into real estate, I kind of partnered with him when I first went into the business, and he has been such a great supporter because he's seen how I've built my business, and he's like, he just sits by at some of these events like, this is just wild how you get this all going. Um, and everybody leaves here so happy at the end of it. So he will pay half of just about everything. That could not be the case, obviously, for the party, because that was a significant expense. What I have done the last 2 years is when I create that 12-month calendar, I already know he'll do half of my newsletter every single month. And then I will send it to him first and say, which of these events would you feel comfortable, supporting or helping with the costs, or potentially paying half for? So that way I know right out of the gate, okay, I have support on X, Y, and Z. And then from there, if I need additional support, that I would go out to other individuals I use, whether it be closing attorney or the handyman. Like he gets so much business from me. So I'll be like, Mike, you want to be willing to help me sponsor this event? And most of the time, some of those types of vendors may not do 12, but if they help you with one, it gets their name out there more. And then it helps my overall budget at that point. Um, so you really just got to look at, okay, where do I have my relationships? And you have to not be afraid to ask for money, because you're helping these folks with your business. And you'd be surprised how many people are willing to help you with yours. But some people are like, I don't want to ask, I feel bad. Just do it. The worst they can say is no. That's always been my motto on that front. As far as how I stay in touch, I started, was it, can't remember now if it was, I think it was last year, I started a monthly email newsletter. So I have the printed one that goes out, it goes out to my neighborhood, but I also include my clients on that, even though some of the Sunset Oak stuff doesn't make sense. The resources page is useful to them. So they're still getting that in their mailbox. Um, the email newsletter, I have a pretty high open rate on that every month. So within that, it's talking about like whatever event or giveaway, whatever it may be that's coming up. That's like at the start of it. And then at the very bottom of it is real estate oriented stuff. Like these are my under contract sold, new listings. And then the middle, I pick anywhere from 5 to 8 events that are happening in the greater Raleigh area. I make sure I don't do them all just in one city. And I try to cover all the different ethnic backgrounds that I may work with. That way I'm showing it's well-rounded, and it's just like it's a soft touch, but hey, I'm thinking about you and including an event that might be of interest to you too. So I think my open rate averages somewhere around 70% for that, which my understanding is that's pretty good for those. So, and that goes out like clockwork on the first of every month. We determined like when it goes out around 8 o'clock, that's when it's most open. So you can kind of track that and figure out what works best for you on that front. I will text and call people. Like I start every morning with Facebook, who are the birthdays. I really wish I had started in the very beginning a better tracking for birthdays, but unfortunately that's the path I chose. So that's the path that I continued to take, but I will call or text them. Of course, I'll still do a post for them on there. Um, I don't do the birthday cards. Again, I wish I could kind of go back in time, and because I feel so strongly, you have to do the same thing for everybody or offer the same thing. So one person isn't talking to the other person, they realize they didn't get it. And I will just bounce back to farming for one quick second. When I had that great success with the pumpkins, another agent saw the success I got, so they decided to do something, but they only did like certain parts of the neighborhood, and it kind of backfired because this one was talking to that one and they're like, well, why didn't I get it? Like, are you just on a more expensive street? And so you really have to think through when you're farming something. I would highly suggest, if you're going to do it, do the whole neighborhood, which I realize some neighborhoods like 12 Oaks or Wood Creek, some of those are just huge neighborhoods, but you got to think about people talk, people are friends, and you don't want to hurt yourself in your business because you aren't doing something. Um, Other things I do is I set up dinners. So I have one group that are all in the medical field, but they're all friends. Like one's two sisters, and then they refer their best friend to me. So I set up a dinner where it's small and just take them out to, like Oak City Steakhouse or whatever, invite all six of them. And it has nothing to do with real estate. It's just like, hey, I wanted to catch up on where you guys are in your life. And I've done that a bunch of times, and it's proven to be an effective use of time, because right after I did one of those dinners, I had a call, hey, we have a new doctor coming to Duke and we want to connect him with you. So I think the more and more you can give of yourself, the better. And it helps your clients get to know you even better when you do those types of things. And then the rest of it is just little things. Like if I know something big is happening in their lives, or if a parent passes away or something, then you can act or react to that and do a touch point surrounding that. But I always give it some time if it's obviously a death in the family or a death of a pet, or whatever it may be.
Yeah. And I know obviously we're talking about a lot of things, and
We
you do
are.
take a ton of action. And I would like to circle back to one of the things that you said, it is our goal to do these big things like once a quarter. And even that is not necessarily always once a quarter, right? Like
Right.
when we talk about doing things consistently, I need you to know that agents, like it doesn't have to be every single month, right? Like at the end of the day, you guys know how big of an advocate I am. If you are thinking of someone that you haven't thought of in a while, there is likely a reason. Like just if there is nothing else that you would do in your business, just make it a point that if you randomly think of someone you haven't thought of in a while, to reach out to them and just say as much like, hey, you've been on my mind lately. Not sure why, but just figured it warranted an outreach, right? Like those little personal touches matter so much. And we're all just human, and we want to just know that other people are there for us. I want to skip ahead a little bit. Obviously, you've done a ton of organizing around all of these events, but I'd love to talk tangibly about your systems. Do you use a CRM? What softwares do you use? And how much do you actually use them? How helpful? Do you like them? Are they the bane of your existence? How is like all of that?
Brian's smiling because he knows how I feel about this stuff. Technology with me, I will say, overwhelms me sometimes. And then it's like I'll sit in mastermind sessions or hear about like the latest and greatest thing. And I'm like, oh, that sounds so cool. But am I actually going to understand it enough to be able to use it? Is it worth the time, effort, and energy? There's some people that are amazing at that. That is not my forte. I've always kept a very rudimentary system, but it works for me. So I have a main Excel tracker that I can put notes, whatever I need in it. I have a client folder for every client that I have. If a client refers a lot of business to me, I do thank you gifts to them, but I keep track in there, as well as the person that makes my gifts. She will help me keep track, because I had someone refer 5 people to me. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm running out of like all the stuff I normally do. I have to think outside the box. But yeah, I'm not a big systems girl. I will tell you that straight out of the gate. I envy the people that are better with that. but it's worked consistently for me. And I think that's a key. You have to, and Brian has said this to me, you have to find what works for you and then stay consistent with that. So
Yeah, and for that reason, I won't spend too much time on it because I don't want us to feel like we need to sit here and think, oh my gosh, because she's doing this, this is what I need to do, right? Like it's always, there are a million things that we can do in our business that make us feel like we have one more thing to do, and that is not our goal here today, but always just find what works for you and don't be afraid to trash it if it isn't for you, right? On that note, I'd love to jump to talking about who you've hired over the years. I know there's a million ways to scale your business, but at the end of the day, it's always about creating leverage. And whilst you can absolutely take the route of hiring a buyer's agent or someone that kind of does a lot more than one thing that you've been great about is hiring for very specific tasks and being unapologetic about that. So I'd love for you to just talk about some of the people you've hired and what they do.
yeah, this has been another interesting road for me because I think we sometimes just get fixated on what we see everybody else doing. So you start to feel like, oh, they have a buyer's agent. I need to have a buyer's agent. But Brian and I had a talk once, and he actually made a lot of sense to me when I was trying to think of how can I scale my time. And the one thing, like, I have all these big ideas, but I'm not the greatest at the graphic design side of it. So he said, maybe your first hire needs to be someone that can do those graphics. Take your ideas, turn them into something, and free up that time that you're spending trying to do something that isn't your cup of tea. So I made two hires. I have one that's just a contractor. I call her my marketing master. She was an amazing hire. I share her with another agent in the area, which at first I was like, ooh, how's this gonna go? But the agent I share her with, we're both kind of bigger presences, but we're completely different people. So it keeps her motivated and energized because she's like, you're just like that softer person. So I have to show your personality. I have to tone down the other person sometimes and show people her personality, but maybe not like the big part of her personality. So, and she has just an amazing knack of, I can say like the slightest idea and she can run with it and turn it into like what I would have envisioned, but I just wasn't very good at executing on that side. And then I also hired a virtual assistant to do project-based things. So when the marketing master had a baby and she was not really working, kind of during her maternity type time, the virtual assistant makes my email newsletters, and she also helped me put together I had the buyer's guide, seller's guide, and moving guide all put together, but I needed a way to get links created. I needed a marketing plan for how I was going to get those out. So I paid her on a project basis. Some people ask me like, well, why don't you have your marketing girl do your email newsletter? I think you got to find people and where you got to meet people where their strengths are. And this virtual assistant is just really, really good with Flowdesk. So she can go in there, design exactly how I want it to be, or create the links, all of that. And it's super easy. Courtney has tried to learn Flowdesk, and Taylor's been kind enough to help, but I've realized it's not her forte. So we I had to that system works for me. Um, I've had a lot of people approach me over the years, like, will you start a team? Like, I want to be on a team with you. And I just don't know if it is right for me. So, you've got to, I think you have to make sure you're not getting stuck just looking at, oh, this shiny thing over here, or this person's doing that, or you have to figure out what is going to scale your time and make you more productive. And that was excellent advice from our Vic.
Yes, and Taylor has helped so many of us with Flowdesk. But I always say, I said this in our social media class and hiring and scaling classes is be willing to be audaciously specific in who it is that you're looking for, while also completely releasing control of what that looks like. Like what is it that you are wanting your end result to be? And don't be afraid for that to be someone that just does that. And you never know who, this might seem like some small one-off task, and you might be thinking, well, who would be this person that doesn't need a full-time job and actually only needs these one or two Z projects here and there? Like, could they possibly be that committed to my end goal while also totally delivering and also not taking up a ton of time? You never know what someone is looking for, what strengths they have. When I hired my social media person, I literally just put it on my Instagram story and was like, here are some roles that I am thinking of hiring. I have no idea what it looks like, but this is what I think. Like, is this you? And the perfect person messaged me, and she has since started doing social media posting. And I have other friends that have reached out and saying they're finally ready to connect with her. And so you never know what might snowball. We talked at the very beginning of this chat about those little benchmarks in your story that are stepping stones, and you look back to where you are now, and it was all kind of a nurture to get you here. So you never know how your growth and your vision for the future can help pave the future for someone else's vision and where they end up. So cheers to always leaning into that. I want to be mindful of our time. I know we're running up against it. I think all of this is a perfect segue into mindset. I know that's something that you're really intentional about, and it's something that as you've grown, obviously, like, we are always pouring out into others, and it's just as important that we pour into ourselves. And our internal world is such a mirror to our business and the way that we show up to others. And so we've got to make sure that we focus on that first and foremost. I'd love for you to kind of speak to that in whatever way resonates with you and however you want to share it.
Yeah, mindset is so important. I my entire life have just been so driven and worked really hard, and sometimes that gets me in a rut because I start to forget, like, I have to go do something and enjoy my passions, and my passions, concerts, entertainment, Dancing with the Stars, things along those lines. So now I make sure I take time for myself at least every single month. So I made an appointment for a massage once a month. I do a facial once a month because those are just two things that help me to relax, and I'm not attached to my phone during either one of those events. I always make sure I have something on my calendar to look forward to. It could be something small, it could be something big, but that's just how my mind works. And everyone's mind is very different on that front. Um, I always say, like, we always want to hit goals. We want to do better. We want to be this and that. It's not going to do you any good in life and you are never going to lay on your deathbed. This is a quote I've always loved, is you're not going to lay on your deathbed one day and say, I wish I worked more. So I think having a well-rounded life helps significantly. And I got stuck in a rut last year for a multitude of reasons. And it was probably like the hardest part I had just in my general career and life. And I finally was just like, okay, enough of this. You got to regroup and figure this out. And I had to unfollow some people on social media because it was not benefiting me in my mindset to feel like I can't measure up, or I'm not doing what that person's doing. And for me, that helped me tremendously. And then just going back to the basics, like, oh, okay, I just had like this really amazing year. And when you start to get that busy, you start to walk away from some of those basics because you don't have the time to continue focusing on them. So, like, I have a funnel board that I keep posted. That way I know I always have something coming up. And I think you also have to be okay, and it's extremely hard, that maybe you aren't always going to have the best years, but rely on your support systems. I have my little choice girls group that we get together and we help each other and we raise each other up when we need it. Find those little pockets that are going to help you mentally and emotionally. And just, again, you may be talking about work, but it also lifts your spirit up sometimes when you're kind of in those downturns. But the most important lesson I think I took out of how I was feeling last year is just, you got to just shake it off and be okay. And that was extremely hard for me, if I'm being completely honest.
And I mean, when life is throwing you some challenges, it's hard not to to stay there. But, sometimes it's just a reality check of being like, you know what? I get to decide how I show up. And this is hard, but I'm going to show up regardless, or I'm going to show up for me. And I also think two things. One, like so often those little moments can feel like we are down here. But we need to remember that so often our journeys are like this. And so when we're down here, we're actually like so much higher than we've been in our previous years. And it's leading to so much more greatness and perspective changes as well. And so the other thing that I've been really working on too, I'm a big massage girly. I love making sure I got one of those on the books each month. But I also make sure to make a practice of mentally saying, like, the more I pour into myself, the more just naturally attracts to me. And so in those moments when I step out of it, it doesn't always happen, right? But it because I'm paying more attention to it, I do think it's happening more, or I'm just being better about recognizing it, of coming out and saying, oh my gosh, I have a lead that's interested in joining Choice, or one of my past clients is reaching out saying they're ready to start looking, right? Like those moments of being like, you know what, when I pour into myself, that's when I attract everything. It's your mental shift. And I can't help but think that it actually really does attract that. So making sure that when you do take time off, when you do have those moments, you realize it. I think that it really matters. You're right on the money. So I want to be mindful of everyone's time. Is there anything else that you would like to share, or anything that we didn't hit on that you want to make sure that we add?
I think it'll just be another piece of advice in a meeting with Brian that really significantly helped me. So if you're a highly driven individual like I am, um, really look at how you set your goals, because I think that's the other thing that got me stuck in a slight rut there for a while, because I always just want to beat the year before and I want to do this and that. And when Brian was like, let's look at it different. And we came up with this is what I need to pay my bills. The bare minimum, this is what I have to do every single year. And then if there's like a stretch goal, like, okay, I can pay my bills and I can go to do 5 concerts or whatever it may be. What's that number look like? And then have like, this would be a killer year for me, and I could do X, Y, Z in my life that I've always wanted to do, but I might not have been able to do for various reasons. So I think if you're of that same mentality as I am, that has been extremely helpful to me. It's taken the pressure off of me and my need to feel, or my need to constantly be competing with myself. You don't always have to continue to beat everything. You can be happy at those other numbers, but I was not looking at it that way. So, Brian, that was a very helpful meeting that we had. And I definitely want to
Sometimes,
share that.
yeah, sometimes growth isn't just about your sales numbers. Sometimes growth is having more time to do what you love, or being able to step away more, or feeling more at peace in how many transactions you're doing, or whatever the case may be. So thank you so much. I know we have a few questions in the chat. If you have time, Heather, you and I
Yep.
can stick around and I'll touch on those. But before any of you hop off, I just want to say, Heather, thank you so much for doing all of this. And thank you for sharing everything you do. It is so incredibly impressive. And it's been an honor to have this conversation with you. So thank you for your time. If anyone has to go, we certainly understand. I'm going to work my way back through chat real quick. We'll make them really fast, questions and answers. But let me just see. So for the giveaways, how do you get names for those? Cindy Miller was asking, do you have them sign up? Is it just pulled from your database of past clients or your neighborhood?
Yes. So I have a couple of different Excel sheets. I have the neighborhood, and then I have my clients and clients who have referred business to me. And I have a Facebook group that is just them. So I call them the Heather D Real Estate VIPs. So when I do those types of things, I post it in there and they all put enter me in
Mm,
there. And then I draw the name from there.
easy enough. A nice little opt-in, and also it gets some traffic. It's nice to see some comments. Crystal had asked, when you do like the pumpkin pass outs, for example, do you include other realtors on that list?
I don't, and it has pros and cons of making that choice. Um, I just feel like if you're gonna, if because I do have a lot in my neighborhood, so it's a lot of extra expense to do that. And I didn't do that from year one, and I've just again stayed consistent with it. Um, they do like to use that to be like, she's breaking my children's heart, and you can't win with that as far as I'm concerned. So you got to do how you got to do what feels right for you. and for the budget that you have for it. You know, doing 20 extra pumpkins at what I pay now for people I know I'm never going to get business from, does that really make sense? You know, I think that's a personal choice.
Well, and just I'm flipping it a little bit, but to those people that are sitting at home saying, woe is me, or this, judging other people's actions, especially in this day and age of social media, it's so easy to go on and simply consume and consume, and that be how we spend our time, just scrolling. And what if instead, whether it's how you show up online and social media or how you show up in life, it's like, am I going to sit here and complain about the action other people are taking, or am I going to go take action in my own life? Whether that is like action in your business and doing more there, or whether it's just showing up and, like you said, booking things on your calendar that excite you. It's all about taking up responsibility in your life and taking action. I think that's it. I think I hit on everything in the chat. Obviously, we've got a good few people here. If you guys have anything else that you want to ask that we didn't get to, please feel free to chime in. Otherwise, thank you guys so much for your time. I hope you have a wonderful start to your day. Thanks for being here this morning. And thank you again, Heather, for this.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks
you,
everybody.
Heather.
It's good to see y'all.